Thank you. And Imran, thank you very much for putting waste after music, movies, merchandising, and excitement. So yes, waste. And I'll start with a really bad pun. There's a saying, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And we're in a crisis right now, and the crisis is waste. And right now, I can feel the inner groaning of another sustainability presentation. This morning, the McKinsey report talked about how there's almost this fatigue, how it's becoming less and less important. And I will touch it because we are in a crisis, and yes, it's an environmental crisis. By the way, I also think that just experiences like when people begin to stop focusing on something or dismiss something, it's actually when it becomes really important. You have to go through this big kind of hype phase. But it's only half the story. And that's the really important part that we have to address. And so when we think of this, we think of wasted material, water, how many landfill pictures have we seen? Energy. Well, we don't think of this, storing it, inventory. We don't think of the time of lost opportunity, that we miss trends, we miss directions. We don't think of the money that's tied up, that we waste when we put it in that landfill. And the creativity that we waste because of this. And this is the crisis that we're facing. And it's the only solution is if we look at this together as one thing, because the solution is to address them both at the same time. And so yes, we only need to do one thing to eliminate environmental and economic waste. But first, some math. Okay, what this means necessary. So I'm gonna get very mathy on this. We focus a lot about sustainability, and we focus on profitability, but we don't talk about sustainability and profitability. And so we forget, we talked about, somebody mentioned earlier in one of the other sessions about the companies that have gone out of business, these sustainable companies. Well, they didn't go out of business because they're sustainable. They went out of business because they're not profitable. They went out of business because they didn't have something that people wanted to buy. So we have to make things that people want to buy. So you have to have a sustainable business. By definition, to be sustainable as a business, you need to be profitable. But it's also coming that you've got to be profitable. The only way you can be profitable is if you're sustainable. That's really important. And so what's going to happen is that that means that these are necessary. One is mutually necessary for the other, or they are mutually necessary to exist. And that's a really, really important thing to make. So what we're solving for is not sustainable. We're not solving for profitable. We're solving for sustainable and profitable. And so how do you do it? Lots of equations. I have one more. Supply has to equal demand. So we make everything on demand. Simple, easy solution. I'm done. Thank you, Imran. No, I'm kidding. What is this? It's a factory. It's actually an inventory making machine. And this worked great for a long, long, long time. The Industrial Revolution was based on this. How do you make lots of things? And by the way, I'm going to talk about clothing and how clothing is really, really hard to make things. But this makes inventory. And this worked fine because we lived in an environment where we were able to basically, life wasn't moving very fast. We were kind of able to predict the future because we defined the future, right? You had big media working with big brands, working with big retailers saying this is going to be the future. And so you could kind of chase along. So you didn't have this problem. You didn't have people just, okay, now we'll make things faster and faster and faster. But now people started making things faster and faster and faster. And so, where are we right now? Well, 3 hours away, 240 years ago, this thing was invented. And it's probably the second most important element of the Industrial Revolution is the power loom. Actually, when you call people who hate technology Luddites, this is where Luddites started. But that power loom You took a straight line and you drew it 240 years later, you end there. This is the optimization of industry, of our industry, right? Because why? Because supply almost but not equal to, there's my last sign. Almost but not equals demand. So how do they do it? Well, they obviously do it in lots of really, really bad ways, and bad ways that are damaging the planet. This is not going to be a Sheehan roast, but in the end, what you're seeing here is this is what you're taking. You're taking every single thing out of the system that you need to do. You don't have to worry about intellectual property rights. You don't have to worry about residual waste. You don't have to worry about worker conditions. You don't have to worry about the impact you're making on the planet. You just optimize for price, and this is what you get. And by the way, I mean, the statistic, I think on the Business of Fashion had the 53% of Shein consumers are environmentally conscious. 100% are delusional. But how can this exist? Because we don't understand that. Well, this part of this is that we talk about sustainability. People aren't willing to pay the premium. Well, what's really happening here, it's not so much the premium of sustainability, it's the discount. It's this concept of the brown discount of we'll be okay if you give us something cheaper that's really bad, we'll be okay, and we'll kind of look the other way. Well, in the end, that's got to end. So new industrial revolution built on learning. So as I was saying with the movies and everything else about AI, this is what seems like the most unsexy part about AI. It's actually the sexiest part about AI. It's not the part that anybody hears. The conversation we ought to be having about AI right now is how do we change the entire infrastructure of every single thing we do? Yes, it's great for the visual, for the front end stuff. No, it will not replace creativity. I've had a word processor for 30 years and I have not made my first novel yet. That's what it is for the creative process, and it will be. It'll help with some of the merchandising, things like that. But the real thing is what's coming next. And so why, first off, what's the problem we have to solve? To be able to make this industry different, what do we have to solve? We make everything on demand. Well, making clothing is really, really hard. By the way, creative aspect, this is actually generated by 3D, or by AI. If I did this on Midjourney, it would look like the equivalent of stick figures. But somebody with talent using AI actually creates something, which I think is pretty interesting. But what is this? These are lots of, probably 30, 40 pattern pieces in that shirt, all mathematically described, how they connect. Two-dimensional pieces, two-dimensional medium, right? Cloth. Then we're going to cut that up, we're going to sew it together, and we're going to make a three-dimensional product, which we're now going to fit on top of another three-dimensional shape, a human body, which, by the way, every single year gets more and more varied across this globe. And this is really hard to do. So how do you do this? Well, what you do is you actually fix kind of production processes. You make minimums. You say, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to make it in a long run. Now, long runs take planning. Long runs take time. And this is why we have this industry, which has taken this, which now has this where sometimes you have really, really big runs that take 18 months from kind of the creation to actually coming to market. If you're 18 months away, how can you possibly be right in a world where everything is changing so much, where we don't know what's happening? We don't see what's happening. That's the challenge that we're facing. So this is not so easy to do on an individual garment basis. So this is where AI comes in. AI is really good for solving incredibly complex problems. Because in the end, we think about fashion. People talk about slow fashion. We don't live in a slow world. Wouldn't it be great if we just consumed less? Well, we don't. We're humans. We've never done this. Yes, we have to be more responsible. We have to actually focus on not only consumption, but what happens to what we consume. You want to not create waste? Stop buying plastic. that's going to change a lot more than just consumption. So have the right conversations about what we're doing. But what we're able to do now is now create these long runs, industrial systems, where you're actually making something that only exists on demand. You're saying, this is impossible. Well, no, it's not. I mean, we're doing it. I mean, the other people will do it. This is where the real innovation comes. In fact, if you want to look for an investment theme, it's actually, I would argue, it's the 10th company I founded. I've been a venture capitalist. My firm was a seed investor in Pinterest. I was the first investor in Shopify. We've seen a lot of things that have made money in these kind of companies that changed things when they weren't obvious. They came when times were changing, when industries were changing. This is what we're facing right now. I mean, this is actually, we look at it, we think of like the bad economic times, we think of the turmoil, but this is where actually really amazing things happen. So from an AI perspective, the story you're hearing on the surface is going to be the thing that just kind of, I don't think really, it'll be there, it'll be certainly touch all of our lives. But what really will touch is this infrastructure, is how do we change every bit of enterprise technology, all software that runs corporations every single day will look different. The companies making it will look different. You'll see these systems. And so this is the exciting thing of what we're seeing. We're just really right in the beginning of this whole process. And so now if you have something where you are now making things one at a time, what happens? You're changing the focus. You have to do things in real time. So now you have to be distributed. So now actually clothing begins to be made maybe where it's bought, creating jobs. Think about tariff environments where now you have that distribution, where people need to create jobs because AI is taking apart jobs. Think about all these things that need to happen. You need to connect your entire manufacturing infrastructure together in this real-time network. Sounds hard? Well, guess what? Cell phone industry did it. Telephone industry did it. The internet is this real-time network, connecting different things together. And with the complexity of solving that, how do you make things go? Well, the way we do it, actually, we make long runs on a piece-level basis. We'll make different garments, different brands all together at the same time, organizing these long runs on pieces. Could never, ever do that before in the history of humanity because you didn't have the systems that could deal with this kind of real-time complexity. Think about it. You can have an environment where we try to fix the supply chain every day to run the same thing over and over again, to now where we're shifting to the infrastructure is going to be dynamic. It'll never be the same any single day, but it'll learn from everything that happened before every single day. And so what happens is now you start seeing this map look different. Yeah, this vision is not good for the entire world. It's not good for particularly China, but it is good for everywhere else where now you can have jobs come to the US in apparel manufacturing. You can have jobs coming to Europe. You can have jobs created in other parts of this area that never existed before. And so, here's some examples actually out of our factory, and there's a couple of interesting things. This is an idea of how do you make real-time labels and tags by putting them in there. Our goal is never to have anything not colored in the rolls that we're producing in our factory. There's a whole bunch of things that I won't go into in terms of what else is in there. But this is that problem. You look, okay, let's print stuff on a roll. That is incredibly complex geometry in real-time systems where it's taking different things based on different conditions to be able to be filling those things. And every day we're getting better and better because we're able to measure them on an individual basis. This is really fascinating because over there what you're seeing is filling in all that space to be able to make packaging for a brand who wanted to put their prints on every single bag. So they're able to actually take the waste, choose what they're filling, and create it. It's an amazing opportunity in terms of now from nothing that would have gone in a garbage can, now be able to creating utility and creating value. When you're making things on demand, you're making things one. That means you know everything about that one. That is accountability. When I can tell you how many milliliters of dye are in this jacket, when I can tell you who made that? And that's where it has to go. Now, if also I can do that, we're going to talk about circularity, later on in the presentation, is now I can also tell you what to do with that and how to do that, and be able to give the ability to create these circular systems. Why? Because you now know every single garment. And so there is this golden age that can happen. It's coming in infrastructure. And so you move from this world we've lived in of economies of scale to now an economy of one, where now the world looks different. So remember, just think of the numbers. 30% of what we make as an industry ends in a landfill. Now it's gone. Think of those dollars. Think of all the different things and how this industry is reshaped based on this, and how everything in this industry shapes. Now I'm missing one really important thing on this. If I create an environment where basically every brand has an industrial system at their fingertips, what's differentiation? It's creativity. This industry gets to go back to where it started. Where's talent? Where brands can survive, can thrive, can build in an environment where they can create things that they've never been able to create before. Why? Because when you lose inventory, you make the cost of creation zero. The problem with creativity, everybody's a creator. The things that you feel the most uncomfortable about are your best work. And that's why it never sees the light of day. If it costs zero, now it can. And by the way, so what? One person buys it. You make one. There's no MOQs. 1,000 people buy it. Great. Or maybe you only want 37 to buy it. So you stop. But your choice. You drive. And how do you make then these brands sustainable and profitable, driven by creativity? And so it can be, clothing, walking in, New York Fashion Week. But I'm going to talk about this story. This is an indigenous designer. So it's probably Jamie Akuma, incredibly talented. She sold more in her first day out delivering this platform, first few hours, than she did in any month of her existence. Her first weekend, more than a year of sales. Why? Because she could finally make things. She could go and express things that she was terrified of, which, by the way, people loved. And so you think about the opportunity that this gives. And so this is why this new industrial revolution, this is where AI happens. Yes, it's exciting and sexy, all the other things, but it's really this. And yes, it will cause an enormous amount of change in this industry. But I'll tell you, change is opportunity. Like I said, this is when great companies are built in times of change. But it's an industry of a choice. We can drop an anchor, and hopefully these winds of change will stop, or we can put up a sail. And I will tell you, that anchor ain't going anywhere. I don't know where that's going, but I think we're going to be surprised at how wonderful it can be. So, thank you.